Welcome to Dukascopy TV. The ocean is huge, and what lies under the surface could be potential for mining. To give us an insight into the mining is Carl Gustav Lundin. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. There is talk of a gold rush in seabed mining. Can you explain what is behind this?
So right now we see a number of new concessions being granted across the world ocean. Basically there's two parts to the ocean. One is which is in domestic waters belonging to a country in the exclusive economic zone, and the other part is in international waters, and that's regulated by the International Seabed Authority. So what we're seeing is a lot of countries believe there's a lot of wealth here. And clearly, if we think of it, 71% of the surface of the planet is covered by water. Beneath that, there obviously will be a lot of minerals. Much as we've now been able to mine on land for several thousand years, we're just about to start this gold rush into the ocean. Now the big question for us, I think, is this actually environmentally sustainable? Do we need to do it at this point? And I think what we also need to ask ourselves, does it make any economic sense? And what I'll try to tell you today is, in fact, obviously there will be resources there. Some of them are in rare minerals that we do need. But I think already at this point we have sufficient deposits on land to cover for quite some time. What we are seeing that some of the mining practices that are being proposed will have very significant impacts on the marine environment. And I think we need to have very good studies and better understanding before we rush into this. I think the third thing which is really worrying is most companies, and particularly the ones that are state-owned, probably going to be subsidized, or they'll actually be losing money for the foreseeable future. So I doubt very much anyone will make any money in the next 5 years out of seabed mining. So basically we have chauvinism driving the idea that we should rush into the ocean and extract minerals there. And I think this race to be first and to claim resources is something we've seen in other parts of the world in the past, and it tends to be the beginning of something that's really bad for humans and bad for the planet.
Sounds like it could be terrible. So what are the business opportunities then that are driving people to do seabed mining?
Well, we've had some small niches that's worked for a while. One of them is mining of diamonds on the top, on the sort of whatever lies on the bottom, but not going deep. For example, the Orange River has been going into the waters of South Africa and Namibia for millennia, and in this process they have been depositing some of the biggest diamonds that actually made it rolling all the way down the river. Now that has been a profitable business, and there's no doubt that it's been done, I think, in a reasonably good way for the environment. It's not been in a very intensive way. You do it and then you basically let the area rehabilitate. It's also a very high energy type of system where you have an upwelling, so there's a lot of productivity in the system. So the scars of nature actually are very short-lived. You will have new things colonizing these areas within a matter of weeks, and within a few years you will actually see very little difference between these bottoms and the adjacent ones that haven't been mined. So that's, I think, a good example of seabed mining. It's also in shallow waters, so the actual cost for mining is relatively limited, comparatively speaking. One of the new types of mining is manganese nodules. Now, they do contain very high degrees of minerals. The problem with them, though, is they're also associated with biodiversity. Another big issue with them is they're often at great depth, maybe 4,000 meters. And using this huge vacuum cleaner to bring them up is actually very costly. So it's not a given that there is an economy in using them right now. Another type of seabed mining is using the hydrothermal vents. So basically you have very hot water coming out from the inner parts of the planet, and with it comes sometimes deposits of gold and other minerals that are quite a large value. The problem, though, is these hydrothermal vents are the real hotspots, not just temperature-wise, but also in terms of biodiversity. So going in and selectively taking them out is going to have a very large impact on the biota that's associated with them. Now, some of them have stopped having warm water coming through with them, which means they're essentially dormant. That might not mean that they won't restart again, or that there isn't a lot of biota or a lot of animals that are associated with them. So what we're seeing here, in fact, is that we would destroy a very large part of the habitat, very large part of where these things will live. And I think those consequences would be very significant. I think there's some speculation that we could also use the crust of certain types of places. For example, there are underwater mountains in the ocean. You know, there's clearly more than 100,000 of these mountains in the ocean. Right now, maybe we've studied a few hundred of them in some sort of detail, so we have very limited understanding of them. On the top of some of these mountains, you will actually have mineral deposits. So you could essentially go in and strip mine them. Now, as with strip mining on land, this has a very significant impact on whatever is living there. And basically, you'll take away whatever is there. Now, many of these same mountains have very high degree of species you will find nowhere else. Sometimes as much as 80% of certain categories within a distance of only 100 kilometers. So it's very likely we'd lose a lot of different species if we go in with this type of crust mining on top of seamounts. So that's why we're also very hesitant about that way of doing it. So my thinking right now is I don't think there's a really good business case for this. I think countries should take more time to study the effects and really not rush into this. They should recycle more of the minerals we already have mined, and that way we're actually going to sustain ourselves for the time being. So don't rush into it, take your time and do a good job.
But as you said, chauvinism will always win out.
Well, there's always a certain risk, I think, that certain countries will say, you know, we want to claim this for us. So a number of countries are now commissioning or are building ships that are going to be involved in seabed mining. I think it remains to be seen if they will make any money or the only thing they will do is state their claim. I think we're also helping countries. I was recently talking to the Prime Minister of Cook Islands. Some of the Pacific Island nations have some of the largest known deposits of minerals on the surface. And obviously they want to know how to do this and they want to get advice in terms of doing a good thing. At this point, I think they're really looking at the regulatory side. How can they organize this so it becomes a fair way of doing it and something that's good for their country? I think, as I say, a fair amount of extra work is needed here. And gold rush generally tends to translate into a wrecking of the marine environment.
Thank you for coming in today.
My pleasure.
So that's all we have time for. There is potential, possibly, to get minerals off the seabed, but give it a little bit of time before you go out exploring. Thank you for watching Dukerscopy TV.